Yikes. Hello, welcome to another episode of Forgotten Cemeteries, Pacific Northwest. Today we're at Clark's Pioneer Cemetery, located in Clark's, Oregon, Clackamas County, of course. Alternative names include Ringo Cemetery and Clark Cemetery. So let's go meet some of the local residents and hear their story. A little bit about the history of Clark Cemetery. It was established in 1861. Did find a source that said 1870. Regardless, it has an estimated 100 to 500 burials per the Oregon Burial Site Guide. Find a grave is showing around 458 memorials to give you an idea. This area in general, it used to be known as Ringo's Point, from my understanding. As you know, one of the alternative names was Ringo Cemetery. There also used to be a post office called Ringo Point Post Office, not far from here, and I think it's about 3 minutes down the road. And it's a historical location, but I don't think the post office is still standing. There appears to be a lot of Kentucky and Tennessee immigrants buried at this cemetery. Took a while. It's kind of a cool cemetery. It's got its little nooks and crannies and hidden stuff all over the place. So I think the tour will be fun on this, but probably the most prominent figure in this cemetery is Joseph Judge Ringo here, who was born in 1806 in Henry County, Kentucky. He would move to Missouri, unsure when, but Joseph would be appointed as one of the 3 judges by the state governor when Adair County was formed in 1840. It's interesting because most of the first immigrants in Adair County, Missouri were from Kentucky, settling in 1828. I wonder if Joseph was part of them, and that's the reason he got that position. He was one of the early arrivals. Anyway, Adair County was named after a well-respected Kentucky governor named John Adair. If you're in Kentucky, he is buried at Frankfort Cemetery, which is also the resting place of Daniel Boone, I found. Adair County would be part of the war nobody's ever heard of, the Big Neck War of 1829. So of course I had to look into it. I'm like, all right, what the hell's the Big Neck War of 1829? So basically there was always a little clashes between the white man and the settlers and the Native Americans, but things usually got resolved via treaties from my understanding. They kind of came to a resolution most of the time. There was a leader of the Iowa tribe named Big Neck. Given this name in recognition of his great strength, steadfast determination to endure even the greatest of physical hardships. From what I read, he basically traveled to Washington to sign a treaty, not fully understanding the terms. Shocking. So upon returning home, you can guess what he found. A lot of new settlers on the land. He was pretty saddened by what he would see, and he planned on visiting St. Louis to discuss the treaty he signed. Again, he didn't fully understand the terms, and basically I think he wanted to restructure it or just wanted to outright delete it. Because as I said, when he came home, he saw a lot of settlers on the land where his tribe used to live, hunt, and where his ancestors died. So it was a bit of a shock to him. So on their way to St. Louis, they came across a group of white settlers, and they actually hung out together. And Native Americans overindulged a little too much on the whiskey, from what the story said. When they woke up, their blankets, horses, food, anything of value was gone. The Native Americans were kind of left high and dry, so they were kind of wandering around. They were starving for food, and one of the Native Americans apparently killed a hog. And Big Neck is quoted as getting disappointed, saying, "That is wrong. It is true we are poor and we have been robbed, but the hog was not ours, and you ought to not shot it." So this whole hog story apparently blew up, and it got more and more elaborate the more the word spread throughout the state. The story got to the point where the Iowas were accused of verbally insulting and threatening the white women. So of course something must be done about the Iowas. A man named Captain Trammell and his men came upon the Iowas at a spot in Schuyler County called Battle Creek. Shots rang out as the 2 opposing forces traded fire, with neither side really gaining any ground, from my understanding, reading up on the story, or any type of advantage. Several Native Americans were killed, including Big Neck's brother, sister-in-law, and their child. The settlers didn't do much better. I guess they lost 4 men, and one of those men was Captain Trammell. Eventually, the news would reach the governor of Missouri, and he sent 2,000 soldiers to apprehend Iowa and Big Neck. It is said that Big Neck spoke only one sentence when captured. I'll go with you. A brave man dies but once. Cowards are always dying. In 1830, several Iowa Braves and Big Neck were tried by Randolph County grand jury. Fortunately, on March 31st, 1830, the jury's decision was announced. And this is what it says word for word from my understanding. After examining all the witnesses and maturely considering the charges for which these Iowa Indians are now in confinement, we find them not guilty, and they are at once to be discharged. Unfortunately, 5 years later, Big Neck would meet his end during the pursuit of a Sioux tribe member who trespassed and stole 9 of their horses. A scuffle took place, and Big Neck and his best friend were killed in the fight. It is said, being a man of few words, but meaningful words, he said once, "I am shamed to look upon the sun. I have insulted the Great Spirit by selling the bones of my fathers. It is the right that I should mourn." He's talking about his land. So now you can tell the story of Big Neck and the War of 1829. So back to Joseph here, and I'd like to know more if he was involved with that war. In 1864, Joseph and his family made the journey to Oregon, and we're going to talk about one of the earliest black pioneers in a bit, FYI, who traveled with the Ringos. The wagon train was led by his daughter-in-law's father, Joseph Dameron Knight. The family settled at Ringo Point, which we now know as Clark's. One of the things on Joseph's graves that I didn't know about was he was a member of the Sons of the American Revolution. You see that little plate there? That must be similar to the Daughters of the American Revolution, just the male version. So that's neat. That's a first for us. All right, following up on Ringo's story, Joseph Ringo more specifically, is William John Livingston. I was really excited about this one because he is our first African-American pioneer. The headstone spells it as Livingstone, but the obituary and record spell it as Livingstone. So William was born in 1836 in Missouri, and from my readings early on, they describe him as one of the first black men to travel west from Missouri to Oregon. So a little bit about his youth. He was sold into slavery at the very young age of 12 to a man who lived in Hannibal, Missouri, named Joseph Doherty. And it is said that William was resold to Joseph Ringo for the price of $850 back then. It is also said that Joseph Ringo was like a bit of a Southern sympathizer, but William said he would remain faithful no matter what, I guess, and declared he would never separate from his master. So Ringo paid a hefty fee for William, however would free him in 1863. William would travel with the Ringo family in 1864 to Oregon. The story goes that the Ringo family and William experienced several hardships along the way, but made it to Oregon. And Joseph Ringo would actually score a farm in Clark's. But William also had a very uncomfortable trip. Apparently the Ringo family had to keep William in a box during the day during their travel for his safety, and he was only allowed to come out at night. However, the crew would eventually land in Oregon City, and William's patience and loyalty would actually pay off to Joseph Ringo, who gave William a ranch and 40 acres of land, and this was in the Clark's area as well. At this time, William would adopt the last name Livingston after the famous African explorer David Livingstone, who was a Scottish physician. There's kind of that change in the last name, the way it's said. This David Livingstone, apparently this guy was like a mythological being that rose from poverty to riches. He's classified as being an imperial reformer, scientific investigator, explorer of Africa, anti-slavery crusader, missionary, etc., etc., etc. The guy was pretty active, as you can see. This guy's fame would give him the influence to end the East Africa Arab Swahili slave trade. There's literally just too much to talk about when it comes to David Livingstone, but he was a pretty great influence, and I could see why William here adopted his last name. But in the summary, the guy documented like the horrors of the slave industry, and his vision for Africa was rather to kind of dedicate settlements of Christian Europeans who would live among the people in Africa and would help them work out the ways of living that did not involve slavery. That wasn't his vision at all. But back to William here. He would work at several jobs as a hostler. Basically, it's the person that looks after horses. He actually bought a team of horses and transported wood and lumber from the bluffs in Oregon City to the buildings to be built. In 1876, he would marry a woman named Alice Irene Cooper, who I believe is right next to him, and I'll show her headstone at the end of this little talk here. Not much on her, but she came from Missouri and came to Oregon about 1861 from what I read. William was also a successful farmer and acquired property in Clarks, then would sell it. Basically, this guy had a knack for making money in business from what I read. He was also a member of the State Grange, established in 1867. And this is directly from the Oregon State Grange website. The objective of the Grange is to represent the views of rural residents and agricultural communities. These issues include transportation, farm programs, rural economic development, education, health, and safety concerns, and among many others. He and Alice would also have a son together named Charles Irvin Livingstone. Only info I could find on him was that he was employed at a sawmill in Boring, Oregon. William would pass on the year 1912. Interesting piece of information I found on William's childhood was that he was actually the friend of Samuel Clemens growing up. You know him by the more popular name, Mark Twain. Livingstone's earliest appearance in the Clackamas County's deed record shows him selling a total of 128 acres of property located southeast of Oregon City to the very man who previously owned him as a slave in Missouri. Like I said, pretty close to William's headstone, we have Alice Irene Cooper. As I said, not a whole lot of information on her other than she was from Missouri and came to Oregon in 1861. This behemoth of a pyramid, it belongs to Green Willis Mayfield and his wife Mary E. Green Willis was born in Springfield, Illinois in 1836 as they list him online, but here on the headstone we say 1835. Green would travel to El Dorado, California during the gold rush. He would have spent 11 years in the gold mines of California and Oregon until returning home to Illinois. He would marry a woman named Mary Ellen Moore Mayfield in 1867. See her below. So basically, his and his family and his wife made the trip to Oregon via ox team. Says he made his homestead between Viola and Highland. So I'm guessing maybe that's the Clarks area. I'm not really sure. I'll have to look at a map. His funeral had the largest attendance ever seen in Clarks when it happened in the year 1909. Mary, from what I read, was born in Tennessee. It's not hard to find Henry Columbus Kleinsmith Sr.'s headstone. It's one of the more larger ones and elegant ones, I'd say. But he was born in PA in 1836. So he was living in PA during his early life, married and happy, until the Civil War came to the United States. I was reading up on it. In 1862 in Pennsylvania, they wanted to boost the Union ranks, and the Secretary of War actually ordered a draft. White men between the ages 18 to 45 were to be drafted in each PA county. So Henry practiced Mennonite religion, from my understanding. And the Mennonites not only refused to bear arms in time of war, but they refused to attend militia training. They refused to have anything to do with military organization, in other words. Henry is listed as being a conscientious objector, actually, to the war. However, I did see Henry's brother, Daniel Kleinsmith, serving in the 104th Pennsylvania Infantry Regiment, so maybe just Henry followed the religion in the family. I wasn't really sure. For this reason, he and his family would flee to Canada until the end of the Civil War, and Henry is listed as being a house carpenter by trade. In 1881, he and his family would move to Kansas, live there for a bit, then made the big move to Oregon in 1884, landing in Clackamas County. Henry's wife, Sarah Weiss Stauffer Kleinsmith, that's a long one, is buried with him, from my understanding, and she's on the other side of the headstone, and I'll try to show that during the tour. Kind of looks like a scene from The Exorcist, where the preacher's thrown down the stairs or whatever it is, or he dives out the window. Not to give away the end of the movie. If you haven't seen The Exorcist by now, I'm sorry, but it's been a while since the movie came out. You can't find the headstone or grave of Darius Dennison, from my understanding. He was born in 1830 in New York. However, we got this nice little view to honor him and talk about his little story. He did come to Oregon in 1879. Late arrival, but Darius actually helped lay the first stone for the Oregon City locks. In addition, he was also part of the first brick laid for the Oregon State House. Unfortunately, that's all I could find, but piece of history. I'm unsure if this is him, but this is Samuel Scriber. Looks like the headstone's busted in half, and his wife is pretty close here. Samantha, different spelling of it, T. Scriber. But Samuel Scriber sat one day at the age of 50 for breakfast with his daughter and son-in-law, and just outright died suddenly out of the blue. Samuel was from Vermont and a Civil War vet with the Union, actually, but again, I couldn't find the regiment, unfortunately, but we do know he was in Vermont. He is well known for being a pure Yankee and having the best jokes, and apparently he was also a highly skilled mechanic. But again, unsure if this is him, but it does look like it, and the writing's just really weathered for me. Maybe it'll show up on the camera for you guys. Okay, I've been here about 3 hours searching for names, and this is the one that kept eluding me, and there's a reason for it. This gigantic bush is just engulfing the headstone, and I kind of knocked it down, and I was like, oh, of course, the one that's hidden in the cemetery is the one I'm looking for. So here we have James Newton Traylor. If you look in front of us, the name Eliza E. Traylor is just barely visible. That's his wife, but James was born in 1832 in Illinois. Pretty big family from what I read on Find a Grave. 8 kids with his first wife, Eliza Emmeline Woodcock Traylor, who's listed as passing at only the age of 36. James served in the Rogue Indian Wars and the Modoc Wars. Never heard of the Modoc Wars, and I became curious on what was involved with that. So again, hopefully we're learning together and we're having these little history lessons, and hopefully you guys enjoy these little side stories. Basically, the Modoc Wars was a war between the United States and the Modoc Indians that took place in 1872 and 1873. Reading up on the conflicts, historians have estimated that the Modocs killed at least 300 immigrants and settlers between 1846 and 1873. So apparently this was just an ongoing conflict between the settlers and the Indians. Perhaps as many Modoc were killed by settlers and slave traders. Settlers apparently were traveling through Modoc territory as early as 1843. So just, again, it must have been just a conflict building up for years. A treaty was attempted in 1864, and the agreement was the Modoc would receive goods and protection once they moved to Klamath Reservation in Oregon. However, the Modoc would file grievances several times, but agents would basically ignore it. So 200 Modocs under the command of Captain Jack, not that Captain Jack, this Captain Jack, fled the Klamath Reservation and settled to their ancestral land along Lost River. Captain Jack and his crew had to move several times, from my understanding. In 1873, President Grant sent a peace commission headed by General Edward R.S. Canby to come to some agreement with the Modocs. Apparently, the interpreters warned Canby the Modocs were not in the mood to negotiate and wanted their demands met. And if not, peace commissioners would be killed. So they were getting pretty serious about their demands. Per the usual, they ignored their threats, things escalated, and the Modocs killed Canby, who was listed as the highest ranking officer killed in the Indian Wars of the 19th century. This would lead to several battles. Eventually the Modocs would have to be dispersed because the army just overwhelmed them at some point where they had to kind of spread out, I guess. On June 1st, 1873, Captain Jack and 5 other Modocs, John Shochin, Boston Charlie, Black Jim, Slolux, and Barncho, stood trial and were sentenced to hang. Slolux and Barncho would be sentenced to life in military prison of Alcatraz. The rest were hanged October 3rd, 1873. After the bodies were buried, Captain Jack's body was exhumed and taken by freight train to Eureka. I'll have to look that up. But some reports state his body was embalmed and then sent to Washington, D.C. for research. Others suggested that he was decapitated and his head was then used in carnival sideshows. In 1898, the Army transferred the skulls to the Smithsonian Institute. In the 1970s, the descendants of Captain Jack found out his skull was at the Smithsonian and appealed for its return to them. In 1984, the Smithsonian returned Captain Jack's skull to his relatives. Sorry, a bee just attacked me. The skulls of Boston Charlie, Black Jim, and John Scochin, and of an unknown Modoc woman would be returned. You can observe Captain Jack's stronghold at the Lava Beds National Monument at, Tule Lake, California. Quite literally in the middle of nowhere, and I'll kind of put a picture in there, but I was looking up on Google Maps and it seems like it's way out there. But luckily we got to hear the story of the Modoc Wars, and we found a trailer. Alright, I talk about this individual during the tour, and I just could not find their headstone. I think it's one of those markers back there, because it's those old styles where they kind of have like a little plate, but then weather eats away at it and moisture gets in there and just destroys it. But I did find some Bergers here, and we'll just use their headstone to talk about Burton Erdman Berger. He's not an Oregon pioneer from the old days, but an interesting war vet story and survivor. It's pretty incredible. So Burton was actually born right here in Clarks and served in the Army during World War II. He would survive 43 months in the Japanese prison and survive the Bataan Death March. Again, I wasn't familiar with the Bataan Death March, and hopefully we're just learning together as we, come across these little stories. So this march was like the forcible transfer by the Imperial Japanese Army of 60 to 80,000 American soldiers and Filipino prisoners of war. Basically, prisoners were forced to march until they died. They marched from Marvelis to San Fernando and from Capas train station to Camp O'Donnell. Apparently, this was a total distance to be estimated between 60 to 70 miles. During the march, prisoners received very little food and water, and many died. Sun treatment was actually a common form of torture, where the prisoners were forced to sit in direct sunlight without head coverings. Anyone who asked for water was immediately shot. Casualties from this march ranged from 5,000 to 18,000 Filipino deaths and 500 to 650 American deaths during the march. The march was documented to have severe physical abuse as well. In addition, killings for just no reason or motive, just because they felt like it. Finally, word got out about this, and Lieutenant General of the Imperial Japanese Army Masaharu Homa was arrested by Allied troops and charged with war crimes. In September of 1946, he was sentenced to death by firing squad. Fortunately, our friend Burton here, somewhere around here, I'm guessing in the back like I said, survived this march. He would graduate from Oregon State University in 1949 and was a journalist. He was also the executive director of the Nebraska State Bar from 1970 to 1980. He was a licensed pilot, a member of the Columbia River chapter of American Ex-Prisoners of War. Alright, time for the tour. It's a quiet area. I wonder if I've been talking too loud and some of the farmers heard me. Get all weird. But there's a sign for Clark's Pioneer Cemetery. And right up front, there's the Sagers. Couldn't find anything on them. But some early birth dates of 1840s, looks like. And right next to the sign, that's where you'll find William Livingstone, or William Livingstone, depending on your source. But we'll go off his headstone. And then I believe his wife is right here, Alice. Maybe I should get a better shot. So I'm not in it, that might help. She's right here. And there also is like another little headstone here of AIL. So maybe that's the original for Alice. I'm not sure. I am having trouble finding one individual, and sometimes I'll discover him during the tour, and then I'll remember it and add it to the video, hopefully. But if it's a trailer is the last name. Humans is a popular last name here, I noticed. Right off the bat, there is a couple war vets I'm here noticing. And there's a lot of like little hidden ones around here, kind of hidden by these brushes. But I can't make that out. It looks like Mary F. Rear? Can't really make it out. It starts with an R in my eyes. Maybe the camera cleared it up. Well, like I said, I cannot find a trailer so far, but as we're doing this tour, maybe we'll find them. Especially in here. Who's in? I've got a dunk on everything. Who's hidden back here? G.O.W. Lee, not our trailer we're looking for. And then another Lee. Yeah, somebody's vocal. Check out the front here. No luck so far, but last name Shui. Looks like a lot of the Shuis are up front next to the road. Don't know much about that name. So this is just for holding flowers or black widows. Maybe I shouldn't have opened that. You come here, it's a chicken rooster. He's been at it the entire time I'm here, so you might hear him the entire video. But back to what I was talking about. If you come here, it's very quiet. There's the Kleinsmiths, and there's Sarah on the other side that we talked about. We talked about her husband, I believe. But if you come here, there's plenty of room to maneuver. I'll show you hopefully soon where I parked. Kind of taken care of. I mean, you do run into stuff like that, of course, and I think that's just maybe old age. I'm not really sure. I think I read online they asked that you don't come up that way, up the center, so I'm guessing that's for service. James Baker. I think he says he's born in 1825. But the cemetery had a lot of little history lessons and stuff, and I was hoping to find that trailer. Maybe I'll do one of my things where I kind of point it out at the country and talk about them, because there's a little bit of Modoc War history in there, which is interesting. So that's where you'll come in at. And you could park down there, and there is a, I guess you want to say, an outhouse. Wiggle. Which was kind of just a piece of sheet board with a hole drilled into it that goes down to the earth. So that's where stuff goes. It did smell bad though. Got the door open so it airs out a lot. I'm sure you're very excited I'm talking about bathrooms right now while doing the tour, so apologies. Cunningham. Oh, there's that gate design we saw again. Shockley. These ones look like they're a little older. Can't make out that one, but it looks like 1809 maybe is the birth date. Sarah Jane Stevenson, born in Georgia to Oregon in 1852. Nicholsons are right at the top of the stairs. Talked about them. This one being swallowed up by time. Oh, those are Jaggers. Those are going to hurt. Oh, Albert. Yeah, kind of make that out. Son of J and E Nicholson. I believe that's the one that had the story of the drowning. He was only about 22. That one's really weathered. I'll just put the camera there just in case you can see it. I'm also noticing someone that sometime put like little plates identifying who they are and a bolt down the center. Can't make that out, but one thing I'm noticing is there's these like shrubs, and you're seeing this like something used to be there, because that's definitely a stone. And the same with this guy, there's a stone there. Perhaps potter's field, I don't know. Markers, unclaimed, unknown type of style. There's one 1844. In 1844 a lot born. The Ringos are kind of in the center of the cemetery. And don't forget, one of the alternative names is Ringo Cemetery. But not too far from the stairwell that comes in. There's one Joseph Ringo. I imagine this was a Ringo, but looks like nothing's left of the writing. Archibald W. Ringo? Milda Ringo. But the two OGs are Joseph Ringo here. We talked about him earlier. And then I think this is his wife, Mary Ringo. She was born in 1798, so pretty early birth year. And then just kind of like a bunch of Ringos, I guess you could say. This one looks like it was redone. It looks like the original one was maybe here, and they put a plate on there at one time. I think Joseph's brother that came with them early on is right here, and that's James Ringo. And that makes sense because he was born in 1804. But you can see not much left of his headstone except that little tiny square with his name and his date of birth. Hopefully it survives. There's kind of this behemoth of a pillar for Robert Ringo and Lizzie. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's some type of farmer's mark symbolism. We got down here Orem. Oh, cool. Ammunition, Tennessee, World War I. Definitely one of the more quieter cemeteries, more quiet cemeteries I visited. A little away from the road. 10 o'clock cemetery is right up the road. I think it's about 5-10 minutes. I was hoping to visit something called Schwebel Cemetery. they were doing a bunch of construction, and when I came down the road, they had all the construction vehicles parked right in front of the cemetery. I was like, yeah, it's not happening this trip. I was hoping to do like a little Beaver Creek series, but oh well. I think this is the Larkins plot. There's an unmarked one there, written by time. There is a current one I'm looking for too. It's not a pioneer, but an interesting story about one of the wars. We'll try to keep our eye out for him, but it's Berger, the last name, B-E-R-G-E-R. We've seen that before. We saw that at Rafty, where you kind of sign your life away in a sense. Put your signature on your headstone. I'm not sure. Fancy cursive on there. Oh man. Wow. I wonder what used to be here. That's in really bad shape. I don't think we know who that is. It's like it's shattered and somebody took it. There is like a little plot here all fenced off. Maybe there's an entrance close. We'll have to look for it. An interesting one. The boat on the front of Taylor. Looks like the wife's still alive, but the husband's buried there. Reserved. Two of them. Good location overlooking the farm. A nice one of a farmer, truck driver perhaps, or actually probably a hunter. I look at it closer. I think we'll work our way to the bottom of the hill where the stairwell comes in. A few stops in the way. Wow. Looks like we had Jesus on there. Apparently a very religious individual. I think the plate shattered though over time. Kind of these ones along the stairwell, which are pretty new. You see, you got one here from 2007. So we're missing two so far. I was hoping to talk about, but I will continue to look for them after the video. Maybe get lucky. There's one down here, 2018, pretty recent. Get them gophers. That's awesome. But that's the end of the tour. Pretty good cemetery. A lot of history. Definitely a lot of history. We got to see our first black pioneer out here in our video land of YouTube in the state of Oregon as well. So hope you liked the video. Have a great day. If you have any recommendations on other cemeteries in Oregon or southern Washington, feel free to speak up, and have a great day.